You're listening to Rookie Pirate Radio, the official anime and manga podcast for In Between Drafts. I'm John Negroni.
And I'm Travis Imus.
And today we are doing not one, but two manga recaps for One Piece chapters 1075 and 1076 because, well, I've been on vacation for the last few weeks. I've been in Japan, actually, which means I bought some One Piece stuff. Travis, I mean, I'm sure you're surprised that I took advantage of the being in town.
Not enough, in my opinion.
I gotta say, I was feeling the Wano vibes, right? You know, and I was definitely, there were all kinds of times like during that trip where I was like, that's where Oda, you know, gets that reference, or, oh yeah, that's what Hiyori does okay. Yeah. All right. It's nice.
I want to hear you gush about it, but like you said, we have a lot to cover.
2 chapters. You've never done 2.
No, I didn't want to. It felt like if I had tried to do it without you, it would be a crime tantamount to being punished by walking.
I would have sent you. Yeah, I would have sent you to Impel Down.
I was going to make a Zunisha joke about not being tall enough. So.
All right. Well, we will be discussing spoilers for the One Piece manga, of course, up until this point in the story. So if you are not caught up, if you have not read these chapters, be sure to do so now. You can do it for free on the Viz website. They are available 3 weeks after the official release. So you got a little bit of time, and we will link to that as usual in the show notes. And as always, we want to hear from you, the listener. We can't do all the talking. So if you'd like to add your own thoughts to our discussion, like a theory or some speculation, we'd love to bring it up on the show, especially if it's a correction, something we said wrong. You can email us. What did I say? Email, Travis? I sure did. We have an email address now. It's rookiepirateradio@gmail.com. Travis doesn't know about it because I made it like an hour ago, so I didn't even tell him. But Travis, it's true. The rumors are true. Let the news coos know.
The email is real.
It's real. It's rookiepirateradio@gmail.com in our show notes if you don't want to memorize it. Or even better, if you don't want to message us anonymously, you can join our Discord server, join the Rookie Pirate Radio community, where we have a special channel dedicated just to One Piece spoilers and discussion. We'd love to see you there. All that info is in the show notes. You can check it out now. But let's start with chapter 1075. The title of this chapter is Labofe's Death Game. In this chapter, I'm going to do a quick little rundown now. So, a mysterious saboteur cuts off all the cam snail connections in Dr. Vegapunk's laboratory, straining various groups of the Straw Hats and Vegapunk satellites and allies as they search for the main Vegapunk body. Brook and Nami are hanging out with Edison on the 3rd floor of Building A. Robin and Chopper are with the newly repaired Atlas on the 2nd floor of Building A. Jinbei and Sanji are with Stussy on the 2nd floor of Building B, which we learned is the weapons development floor. And Frankie and Usopp are with York and Lilith on the 3rd floor of Building C, which is where Pythagoras was attacked in the last chapter. And they find Pythagoras, the head of Pythagoras at least. He is still alive and kicking, but then they get attacked by the S-Snake Seraphim. Finally, Luffy and Zoro are with Shaka in the main lab, only to get attacked by S-Bear and S-Hawk, who are mysteriously trying to kill the still handcuffed Rob Lucci and Kaku, who just woke up. And they plead with the Straw Hats to release them so they can help in the fight. Travis, kick us off. What do you think of chapter 1075? I didn't even mention the cover story, but we can talk about that as well.
Generally overall, very, I think we now finally understand what the real Egghead Island arc is. We have officially entered the Among Us / John Carpenter's The Thing arc of One Piece, and I like it. I like that we've logically broken up the gang into groups. It kind of feels like old Alabasta days where we have some folks are in an actual unit rather than just completely on their own. And the ending panel is possibly my new favorite reaction panel of all time.
Yeah, it's kind of taking a cue from Wano a little bit, but I was going to say, look, we've been mentioning how different chapter chunks of Egghead have resembled various arcs. There was a chapter where it's like, oh my gosh, this is just like Water 7. This is just like Enies Lobby. This is, I think, our Long Ring Long Land arc, kind of, where we're just kind of having fun playing some games, and at least that's what I hope happens. It's actually too early to say. But yeah, in terms of, where to begin with this, Travis, I got to know. I mean, what do you want to talk about first? I feel like this is one of those chapters that's perfunctory, right? It's kind of just, it's a lot of setup. It's not a ton of revelations or anything. It's just a little bit more of like, all right, let's set things up for the next big thing. So in our case, I think that gives us a reason to probably not dwell on this chapter too much, because I think the real meat is in chapter 1076. But is there anything you wanted to pull out of this?
I think we can just take it in order, more or less how you lined it out. Right out of the gate, we have explosions happening. It feels very frantic in the moment. Shaka is looking at monitors, and they are just starting to drop one by one. They're all, of course, snails, and they just start blinking out. We get a quick silhouetted figure. Someone is taking out the feeds, and we just have our we just immediately start switching between. So I guess my first question is who do you think is taking out the feeds?
Yeah. Who is the saboteur? Who is doing this? And you and I were talking about this a bunch when we were in the when we were just like chatting offline, basically, because this chapter did come out like right before I went on vacation, but we didn't have time to record anything. So there you go. But I kind of want to start with the cover story. You said in order, Travis. Okay. So I'm just taking you
technically in order.
Yeah, it is. And we got a new installment of Germa 66's An Emotionless Excursion, Volume 31. Is this the longest cover story in One Piece manga? I don't remember.
Gut says no.
It's been a while. I feel like it's been a while since we had one past 31. A lot.
Oh, for sure. Especially since this is barely what it says on the cover on the title anymore.
I know, right?
But I want to say no. We've had, I guess if you count Decks of the World, it's by default the longest. Because we pick it back up every once in a while, but that might be cheating.
So there's 48 installments of that. Yeah, you're right. I didn't think it was that long. Maybe because I don't think all of them are consecutive. But
it's not. That's why I question if it's cheating or not to say that one. But this is one of the longest consecutive ones.
Yeah, there you go. It might be. But yeah, so we see Dr. Vegapunk a long time ago, his black hair and everything. And we see the Gorosei. And we see the Gorosei, and they still look kind of old. And so this has been adding some fuel to the theory that the Gorosei are immortal, because you'd think that, if Dr. Vegapunk looks the way he does, that they would look a little bit younger, and they don't. And I for a long time have figured that these guys, the Five Elders, they've been around for hundreds of years, possibly were around during the Void Century. And I've always loved that idea that one of the secret things about the Celestial Dragons is that they keep themselves immortal under unspeakable methods, and that's one of their main drives. I forget though where you stand on the immortality theory. You seem kind of agnostic to me about it, but I don't know.
I have accepted that they are definitely old. The fact that they are silhouetted is
I love that. It's so non-committal.
It's just I mean they have to be unreasonably old. But of course there are people in One Piece that are unreasonably old as just the nature of their biology.
Well, like the giants.
So is this right? So it's I have a hard time just saying, they each have had the opopnami surgery and all that jazz. It feels like there's a different answer to this. They are obscured. Like, of course, we still see that they have their identifying hairlines, but they're silhouetted, which is so weird to do at this point. And I mean, I'm sure that Oda doesn't spend nearly as much time on the cover stories as he does everything else, because frankly speaking, he has a lot of work to do here. But I can't help but question why they're in silhouette, why obscure them, because obscuring details in this cover story has been one of the ways that Oda has communicated reveals. We of course have the Buckin, like, she's over here, she's the hanger-on. Stuff kind of hinted in the background. We have Vegapunk's work versus the other guys' work. And then, of course, the big reveal of Pudding being kidnapped, then rolling into a main chapter. So the fact that they are silhouetted and we have one of these guys en route right now, that's a tip off to me that even if they're not visually different in their meeting with Vegapunk, there's something that we're going to be revisiting here with these silhouettes, I feel like.
Yeah, because have we ever seen Saturn on his feet before? He's got the cane, so yeah, I feel like we always see him sitting.
Usually, I cannot perceive him. I'm trying to visualize it. I can't even perceive him.
It is possible we're just forgetting, but yeah.
Weeks ago, we literally couldn't visualize these guys outside of their room. So yeah. All bets are off. But hey, you never know. Maybe they're all Zoan users, and that's why they're obscured right now. I don't know.
I just love even just the dramatic composition of this, the silhouettes in the background and the foreground. It's like Vegapunk being so happy and being like, haha, I get an audience with the it's pretty fun. But okay, we can move on. Yeah, so on to what you asked. Who is the saboteur? Who do you think it is? My guess, and I brought this up with you a bunch already. I forget if I've said it on the show here, but I've been thinking that there is a seventh Vegapunk. And I think that there's some significant fuel to that theory in this chapter because, and to be clear, I think that it is a traitor satellite, but it's not a satellite we've met yet. And the traitor satellite, I believe, is probably working with Caribou. I love the idea that Caribou is around and is like that form that we see in the monitor, but isn't the actual saboteur. And the reason I think there's another satellite is because it really falls in line with just kind of the setup so far. There's even a line where Edison, I think it's Edison or Pythagoras. No, it's Pythagoras, who says that it must be some kind of design mistake, design fault. They're speculating, they saw who was, and they seem to imply that there's something wrong with whatever happened. And it's impossible, And I also just think that the fact that all of the satellites are with other people right now, they're all accounted for. So it just doesn't seem to work to me that there would be. I know people still think it's it's probably Edison or it's probably Shaka, but yeah, no, I'm sticking with there's a seventh satellite. But where are you at with that? Do you think I'm nuts?
I'm very open to the seventh satellite idea. It would be, I think, from a critical perspective, it's very hard to pull off, it's this character you didn't know existed, and have that be everybody is going to be on board with that. But I think it's completely feasible. There's never been really, we had Rob Lucci list out the satellites and everything, but we've never had a Vegapunk actively say, this is everyone. There's no reason to think that there's not a bad model hiding in the back. I would offer another idea, though. Maybe not. I have another one
too. I wonder if it's the same.
I was going to say, just there are a few animals still missing from the Seraphim lineup as of right now. That could be running around, being a little saboteur. And if I had to pick one, it's the one Paramecia user that we haven't really had show up yet. And that would be
Moria?
If we... I would say S. Flamingo.
Oh, yeah.
Just because that if any of them are running around rogue, it's probably satisfying for it to be that one. I don't think, now I want to stress, I don't think they're the traitor. I think whoever was seen on camera and whoever is actually behind things we will discuss soon are two different entities, which would be how this works. Is there's a Flamingo Seraphim running around, being his little butthead self, following orders and breaking stuff down. That's one idea that I'm entertaining.
I don't know. I could be that. I like the idea of Moria in terms of bringing back the cloning stuff with Dr. Hogback. But even if you don't do any of that, I was thinking we get a clue here that the other satellites don't have authority over the Seraphim right now, which means somebody had to have given them a different order. And I think like when this chapter came out, a lot of people were like, oh, it's Vegapunk. But not to get too far ahead, in chapter 1076, we get confirmation that no, it's not Dr. Vegapunk, which we'll get to. So my thinking is that, combining that with the idea that this is like a failed experiment, that there was some kind of design flaw, makes me wonder if this is like some kind of like seventh Vegapunk that was supposed to be like a new version of the satellite, the Stella, instead of the satellites, the Stella being the main body. So we get the hint here that they're trying to grow organs, that they have that ability. Robin even says that like, oh, I thought that these are Dr. Vegapunk's organs. It makes me wonder if this is like maybe not a clone, but like some kind of different way to replicate Dr. Vegapunk because he's getting older, but who would essentially be a version of Vegapunk that's more closer to being him in terms of DNA, not just his like subconscious split up. And so that could be the issue. And that could be like the reason why this Vegapunk has so much authority over the Seraphim when the satellites don't, because Oda went out of his way to be like, oh yeah, even if you're at the same level, you can't override an order. And that of course sets it up so like, oh, the satellites, it's got to be one of them. Well, it could be somebody a league higher, possibly. So that's what I'm sticking with. I think that could be a fun little like, oh yeah, let's tie it back to all the cloning stuff that's been going on. But I understand that some people are like, how many clones do we need in this manga?
Yeah, it's one of those things where it's the time travel thing, right? Now that we've opened that door, it's always going to be there. But the such things are best used sparingly, and I respect that Oda is kind of playing his cards tight in terms of even going so far as to say Whitebeard Jr. is a clone, even though we've all kind of pieced that together. But the one thing that I do want to point out regarding our hints, so to speak, is when Pythagoras is talking about design mistakes and everything, it is very possible that it's just literal and he's referring specifically to the to S-Snake, because then she immediately shows up and it's very clear she's the one that attacked him, at least as we currently see events playing out. So it's very possible he's referring specifically to her, because after she attacks and blasts them, Pythagoras says, right, she won't listen to orders. So he thinks it's design flaw. There is what I'm taking away from that. That doesn't mean that's exactly what it's saying. That's just kind of how I'm reading that situation. But as you point out, it would still be a satellite, at least, of that authority. We probably don't have another rogue CP person running around, and I know a lot of people think it's Garcia himself, but let's face it, if Garcia showed up, we'd probably have a better indication of it. I don't think he would start playing stealth right now. But yeah, it definitely seems, my honest guess for at least the saboteur portion is Caribou. That's the most obvious, and it's not even a planned thing. He just doesn't want to be captured on screen so that the government doesn't know he's there. It's just complete fluke. That's my take.
I did want to bring something up actually about before we like kind of blow past it. There's a scene where Lilith is shown, and she has like the bubble gun. I thought it was kind of cool because it was like, oh, she says it shoots the ultimate bubbles that can deflect anything, and that's like the pawpaw fruit, right? The pawpaw fruit's ability is that it can repel anything. And so if that's the case, like, it's kind of cool. It's like a nice little like, oh, a nice little tie to how Vegapunk researched Kuma and researched, obviously for Esper, who has that ability with the bubble burst or whatever. Just wanted to point that out. It made me kind of wonder what other sort of paramecia weapons they might have lying around, if that's a thing, especially because even Frankie brings up is like, so deflecting things is an attack now, which I think is kind of funny for him to say. But yeah, there you go.
It's good to know that this tech can be miniaturized enough to fit into someone's hand. If somebody had like cannons that came out of their hands or something, just a hypothesis, if you may.
Yeah, Baby Five's Devil Fruit would be a pretty cool one to replicate there. I also...
if this is... I'm going to cut you off, sorry. If she can manifest any weapon that she knows about, technically, if she learned about this gun, could she manifest it?
She needs more hockey. Sorry. That's the answer to every question.
There we go.
Oh, yeah, not enough hockey. Sorry. I was also going to mention it's kind of interesting that Jinbei, Stussy, and Sanji. When I first read this, I was like, wow, that's a powerful trio there. Like Sanji and Jinbei are two of the strongest Straw Hats, and there was Stussy who just took down like 2 members of CP0. Like, okay, so what's going to be their challenge? And then when I was rereading this, I was like, oh, that's interesting. So like Jinbei says that this is the weapons development floor, so they can't cause any big vibration. So when something goes down, they can't just sort of go all out, because, the implication is that there could be an explosion. The lab has already been damaged. And so I thought that was a nice little hint at what's to come for them. It looks like their challenge is going to be more like a mind game or something like that. I'm assuming they're going to go up against Jinbei's Seraphim, because I think that's the only one left that isn't accounted for, right?
Yes,
that we know of.
I believe that's right.
Yeah. So that's probably coming. But as for now, Snake is up against the team. York is out. They took care of York. And York is turned to stone, which is funny. Turned to stone in the way that York is the traitor theories turned to stone after this chapter. And we also move to see Rob, Lucci, and Kaku have woken up. Maybe they were awake the whole time, as people thought, and just pretending to be asleep, just pretend you're asleep, so they don't get attacked again. But we get this interesting thing where, Zoro was like, I can't let these guys die or get slaughtered with handcuffs on. I'll leave a bad aftertaste, which I thought was kind of interesting. Does that feel Zoro to you, that he cares, about that sort of thing?
Absolutely. This is the man who very early on in the series just accepted his own fate with wounds on the back are a shame. He's a super honorable warrior.
I agree, but at the same time, these guys are assassins who betrayed Iceberg, and so he has that for even somebody like that. I guess that's something that I just didn't fully appreciate about Zoro. It's even the worst enemies, the scum of the earth, because he even says he remembers what happened with Iceberg. You mentioned that earlier in the arc. I guess that's the kind of guy he is.
I mean, it's exactly what Luffy zeroed in on is Zoro's his own strength of character, his own strength of will. He has a code, and he sticks by that code, and he will eat dirt to live by that code if he has to. I know there's a lot of Zoro fans, and this is going to hurt their feelings, but sometimes it can feel like Zoro falls into the background when there's not a fight going on. And since he's one of the more composed members of the crew most of the time, every single one of them are clowns, of course, but he tends to be the more mature one. He tends to be the one who grounds Luffy, for example, specifically. And he often has to be the wet blanket as a result. But he really is someone who is consistent. This is not only exactly what I would expect from him. I know that it is something that if Luffy come back and found out that he had left them that way, he probably would have, just like in Whiskey Peak, started throwing hands immediately. So to me, it wasn't surprising at all. It's a part of why I love these two, specifically in their dynamic, is that they are willing to cause their own problems to be the straight up guys they are.
And I love when they team up. They've been teaming up a lot lately. Between this and Wano, Oda has just been really giving them time to be bros, which I like. I was gonna say that this is one of the reasons why I'm still pretty sure that Yamato didn't join the crew at the end of Wano, because I just feel like the crew needed another sort of high-spirited character, because we have Zoro, who's very serious. We already have Jinbei, who's the elder statesman. We have Robin, who is serious, but she does have her fun little imagination bubbles once in a while. They all have their quirks. But I was like, oh yeah, Yamato would be a great addition. We could use another comic character to round things out. But then we all know what happened there. I don't have to relitigate the Wano the Wano-traversy, contra Wano, I can't do it, of 2022. But yeah.
Yeah, that's a good point. It really begs the question of what the plan is for that. But you credit to Egghead for really giving us some actually good crew interaction, because for everything that Wano is great at, we only got so much of it with with the crew together. So even these little bits that just like Zoro and Luffy having a ball, it warms my heart because we're only going to get so many more of these.
Which, to be fair, I will say the anime, when I was talking about this earlier today, anime has been doing a good job with that in Wano, in terms of like just extending things and giving the crew more time to really like flex together. Like, for example, I was rewatching a part of Wano when they're on Onigashima and they're Luffy is like under the ceiling, right? And there's that whole scene where all the Straw Hats kind of band together and like are like, all right, we're gonna, help Luffy get to the top. And like, it just did not land the same way in the manga. The manga was a little bit more like the pacing was pretty rushed at times, and I like the anime has been sort of extending that stuff a little bit better in terms of like, yeah, let's just kind of slow down here a little bit. Sometimes, a lot of the time, the anime slows down way too much. But lately, I feel like they've been slowing down the right stuff more often than not. So we'll see if I feel like Egghead is already such a tight comprised chapter or series of chapters that I don't know how much they're going to have to extend in a lot of places. Like just besides the obvious stuff, I feel like it's going to be rather simple and straightforward, but we'll see. But all right, so Kaku and Lucci team up, or want to team up with Luffy and Zoro, and they're like, yeah, just take off these cups. What's going to happen? And then, as you mentioned, the expression happens, and get a little bit of a cliffhanger here. What are Zoro and Luffy going to do, and all of that? Was there anything else from this chapter that you wanted to kick in before we move on to 1076?
Not really, just because we have the nice little bonus of having 76 come in and really fill in the gaps on anything we would have speculated on, so I'm good to move on.
Nice. It actually kind of works out pretty nicely of all of the chapter duos, because we did have a break this past week, so it's not like we're hurting for a third chapter to talk about here. We'll be getting the next one, I think, this next week. So
yes.
Yeah, I didn't double check that, so I'm glad I was right. All right, well then let's move on to chapter 1076. And this one's also a bit of a doozy. So, title of this chapter is Old Friends, which that got me thinking. This after I read the chapter the first time and then reread it, I was like, something's going on here. We pick up right where we left off. Kaku and Lucci are continuing to argue their case with Luffy and Zoro to release them so they can help the fight, so they don't have to be a burden, where Luffy and Zoro can't really fight the Seraphim because they got to drag them around and everything. Luffy reluctantly agrees, and they subsequently handle the Seraphim with little effort, but it doesn't look like they're done. It looks like they get some good blows in, but we don't know if the Seraphim have really been weakened in any meaningful way. We find out that Dr. Vegapunk is indeed inside the lab and has been captured along with the various Cypherpol agents who went missing over the last 2 months. So we get a nice connection back to what has been going on in Egghead, not just this past day, but much longer than that. Also, we get an update that over 100 Marine ships are on their way to Egghead, heightening the tension even further for the Straw Hats to escape while they can. We then jump to Elbaf, where red-haired Shanks sets sail with his senior crew and an alliance of giant warriors, which includes old friends Dory and Brogy. Their goal, of course, is the One Piece, but first, they intend to clash with Eustace Kid, who has been fighting off with the smaller ships just off the coast of Elbaf. And it's looking like we're going to get another Emperor versus the Worst Generation sequence. How many more are we going to get? I surely don't know. Where do you even want to begin with this one, Travis? No cover story. This is a color spread this time around.
I do want to talk about this color spread, though.
It's great.
Yeah, I don't think we've had a chance to talk about any of the color spreads yet since we've started this show.
Not that I think, yeah.
I just want to say, as much as I love the cover stories and everything, the color spreads are genuinely one of the best parts of One Piece, because there's just no limit if I have a really banging one, it will become like we get a really banging one. It'll be my computer wallpaper for months. They're just always so full of life, and this one in particular feels like it's the next. Like when we get another anime OP, it's gonna pull. It's one of these ones that it feels like it's gonna pull from this color spread and give us just kind of a cool titling sequence. It almost feels like an anime title sequence in motion, just in the static image. And I'm just gonna say it. We haven't had enough of these with Jinbei in them, so every single one of them is a winner because Jinbei is in it. I do like, by the way, that I was gonna say I like that Luffy is kind of in the sky, kind of above everyone.
Like
I know it's
sun.
like different aspects, like the sun. That's
his
a good
hand
touch.
even
I like that.
looks like sun rays.
Yeah, like sun rays. Exactly. It's such a cool little composition, and like I said, I genuinely feel like it's like watching an anime OP in action, and it's a static image, which is so. I love. I love how
like Sanji's smoke is turning into clouds, and it looks like an LA mural, like a mural you would find in Los Angeles or Miami, basically. And it's really really fun. And I was going to mention too, Robin's hat looks kind of like Trafalgar Laws, kind of adding to the shipping, that people like to do with those characters. I like how Jinbei looks like a straight up mob boss.
It's by the way, it's me. I'm people.
Oh man, it's a great color spread. I really love it. But okay, chapter 1076.
All right. Well, we should just pick up where we left off. I think.
Where to go? Do you want to do this one in order too?
Yeah, let's just at least for now pick up because we just left off with Kaku and Rob Lucci making their case. We might as well resolve that.
All right. And there's only like 3 segments to this. We have just what's happening in the Lapo phase. We have the Luffy and Zoro section. We have the Dr. Vegapunk, and then we have Elbaf. Very simple. Not a ton of jumping around, but some jumping. But okay. I love Lucci. Like, I love him. He's so funny in this. Like, this chapter, he finally came to life for me because I feel like lately he's just been so overly serious. Like, I don't recognize Straw Hat as an emperor, blah, blah, blah. But he gets some comic relief here. He kind of loses his cool. Did that work for you, though? Like, I guess even with Kaku, he's just like, come on, Lucci, help me deceive these guys. He's like, I'm going to assassinate the 7. It's great. She will pay the price.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
I feel like I'm reading Spy Family.
Oh yeah, and it's a great humor. It's a great classic One Piece humor segment. But I really like not only what it reveals about Lucci, but it also reveals that Luffy kind of understands Lucci. He doesn't understand Kaku because he hasn't fought with him. He hasn't had like a lot of direct engagement with him. So he's like, oh yeah, cool, sounds good to me. If you're gonna play nice, and like Zoro's gonna be like, no, he's not like that. But with Lucci, Luffy's not messing around. He immediately knows exactly how to needle this guy and knows exactly how to get him in line in a particular situation. And it's full of that Luffy bravado and confidence. And yeah, Lucci absolutely takes the bait. It is amazing to see how the roles have flipped for these guys. Because 2 years ago, Lucci would have absolutely baited Luffy in the exact same direction. And what a difference 2 years and some really nasty brawls make.
Yeah. There's one thing I wanted to point out, it just overall for this chapter. It's the similarities between Luffy and Kid in terms of like the way they get stronger is just through like taking such crazy risks constantly and putting themselves in peril and coming out of it even stronger. And in this case, I think it's interesting that Luffy's a little bit more hesitant, like you said, a little bit more reluctant to just sort of, he actually mentions like this isn't like in other things where like he'll just team up, because he's like, yeah, whatever, like an impelled down. But in this one, he's just like, actually, like, I know you're an assassin. I know you won't hesitate to kill people I care about. So he kind of has to strike that, right? And it works. He does it, and he breaks the handcuffs. And I thought that was kind of astute.
Yeah, I've had a hard time explaining this because, of course, Luffy is a dummy. It's one of his great character quirks. But I always tell people, Luffy is extremely emotionally intelligent, provided he's paying attention. Like, it's hard to quantify that because you usually expect that to be a consistent thing that's always going. But in reality, it's just an extension of his own, I only care about what I care about kind of deal. Again, I think Lucci is one of those people that absolutely has captivated Luffy's attention before. And so he's got an understanding of Pigeon Guy. And I think genuinely his own growth, both internally and externally, I don't think he would have made this bet if he wasn't 100% sure. And I don't mean just because they had a fight a few chapters ago. It was only a few chapters ago, if you could believe it. But I think genuinely he's confident enough in his abilities, not in a cocky shonen, I can do this with willpower kind of way, but in a, I know what I am capable of now. I have reached my final gear. I have, I am an Emperor of the Sea. So he knows that, I can bait this guy, and if he tries it, he's not going to win. He's not going to get a chance to touch them. But just in case, I'm going to put him on a leash. And he nails it. What an excellent representation of kind of the fact that Luffy has changed a lot and also not changed at all. Beautiful. Love it.
Yeah. And I think it's interesting.
Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say it's also interesting that Lucci gets to see Gear 4th for the first time, and it's probably just like, what in the world has this guy become?
That's a good point, because we only saw Luffy go into Gear 5th when they fought. That's a good point.
And it's interesting that Luffy does do Gear 4, because he's like, well, there are more fights to come, which kind of tells us like he's improved to the point where Gear 4 is not the sort of like last resort that it used to be. He just whips it out like Gear 2nd.
Yeah, it's he does that a lot in Wano too. I don't know if you said you were watching some of the anime. Do you remember the sequence where they have the three worst generation take on that big battle cruiser ship together, and he just immediately whips into Bounce Man, and it's such a cool, mind-boggling Sakuga sequence. I can't wait to get the exact same version of this scene. Mm-hmm. It's going to be just incredible, because these are motions that they have animated tons of times for all four characters, and it's going to be such a cool dynamic sequence. It really does feel like that battle cruiser fight in the same way. And of course they're all using old moves. It's great. I jumped past this, but I forgot to mention the Mihawk S-Hawk. He uses the dice fruit, which we have long speculated. I don't know if we mentioned it on this, but I know you and I have talked about that a bunch. That like if there was any sort of like devil fruit that would work super well with a Mihawk, seraphim, it would absolutely be the dice fruit, where you just any blade or any weapon can like be used as a sword. And we had a listener too, who's in the Discord forum, even mention that this is could even be a fun little like Oda reference to the idea that Mihawk is a sword theory, which you can find on YouTube if you're morbidly curious. And I know you find to be, whenever I bring it up, the bane of your existence, and you don't talk to me for several days in protest. It makes me wince. It makes me wince so much.
I would just say something. I feel like you're so open-minded to so many theories. You're just like, yeah, that's interesting. Like keep going down. You're so encouraging. Like keep going down that path, kid. But when it comes to Mihawk as a sword theory, you're just like, you just walk away, and I deserve it.
Man, I don't need more Bleach vibes. All right. That's really, I'm Bleach traumatized. You don't need more Zanpakutos. Oh man. No, it's of course the dice fruit is an obvious get. We know that Mr. One was an impel down. We know that Vegapunk had very easy access to his blood. We now know how that works. It is a great reminder, though, that not everyone here in the Labo phase now is apprised of the situation. Zoro, of course, doesn't know how this works, so to him, his mind has been completely blown. And I don't know if that's going to be relevant as this fight goes on or not, but, he might be wondering if
Mr. One is dead in order for this to be possible. And it could be that, like, that's the reason why Oda references the green blood being used. And it made me wonder, too, actually, if maybe that's the weakness that the Seraphim have, that they have only a certain amount of green blood that they can use, so they can't just use these powers like endlessly. I think that would be kind of an interesting wrinkle to throw in.
So because it is artificial, it's not like it's regenerating itself like regular blood. So it's
That's
like
what
a
I would
fuel
think.
source almost.
Right. And so they probably have to like refuel themselves in order to use these abilities. And it would just be a nice sort of like, all right, they're nukes. Like they're extremely powerful weapons when they work, but they have to have some kind of limit. That's my thinking for sure. And that would be a good limit.
If so, S Bear has used a lot of it.
Yeah. He's big. He probably has a big store.
That's an inch. See, yeah, I'm about to do it, but yeah, that's a really interesting idea. I mean, I think that would be an easy way to take these guys down, but it would make complete sense within what we know about them. That's very good call.
So then the next thing to wonder about is what's going to happen next, because we see them, take down. I mean, I don't know, but take down is kind of a strong word. We see Mihawk and S-Bear get hit pretty significantly, but we don't really have an indication one way or another if they've been beaten, if they've barely been hurt, or maybe something in between. But do you think that this fight's going to continue, or do you think we're really just going to move on to the next stage of like, all right, now they got to find out why Nami yelled, if she's okay, and what's going on with the other Straw Hats? Because Nami and who's Nami with again? Brooke, Nami and Brooke and Edison aren't exactly like heavyweights. So like very curious how that's gonna work. And then Atlas is tough, but then and Robin is tough, and Chopper is tough. But like again, these are Seraphim. It makes you wonder like if what's this death game really gonna be like, and how is Luffy and Luffy says here is like, oh, we got to take out all four of them. How is this going to happen? Do you have what would you like to see?
I think Occam's razor on this is, while we have seen a very hard hit, the big reveal at the beginning of the next chapter will be them getting back up pretty unfazed. We know that this is supposed to be a tough fight, and frankly, having Luffy and Zoro free to just go engage in whatever sector they need to engage with kind of lowers the tension for these other areas, especially for, like you said, the way these are broken down. There are a couple of very obvious pick-off targets. I think instead that our boys are going to be a little distracted for at least long enough for the whatever danger is being encountered by Nami and Brooke to be an actual threat to them. Because we need the Seraphim have been proven to be very powerful, but at this point they're still basically pacifistas with devil fruit powers. We haven't seen them really cause too much grief beyond that little fight with Sanji and the main group with the Jinbei Seraphim, which gave them put them on their back feet. But we never really got to see the brawl go to the max. And of course, when you're talking about a rested up Luffy and at his max Zoro, plus the added benefits of their new allies, I think we can make this fight a bit more interesting.
Yeah, especially with I think the tension really is coming from all those Marine ships, which we find out base G9 is like fully deployed at this point, and they obviously time is running out, and that does make you wonder like, is beating the Seraphim really the goal here? Do they need to beat the Seraphim, or do they just need to take them down momentarily, even if it's not a full victory, just so that they can get out of there and move on? That's kind of what I'm wondering, because then that makes me wonder also, like, what does Shaka do next? What's his role? Is he going to stay behind in the lab, or what? Who's going to find Vegapunk, if anyone finds Vegapunk? And, if who's going to be the one who confronts the traitor? Like, there's all kinds of questions I have about, like, what would make the most thematic narrative sense? Like, what would be the most satisfying? And I'm personally coming up empty. I feel like it's going to be a bit of a curve. And that's the only thing that would make sense to me at this point. But I'm sure it'll be fine, It is interesting to see Vegapunk, taken, captured, and there goes that theory. I know a lot of us were wondering, like, is it Vegapunk? Does he have like an evil plan, or is he doing this for a reason or whatever? And it looks like that's the likeliness of it has gone to basically zero because he's injured in this. Like, he's got blood coming down his head. He says to the Cypher Bull agents, I had no idea that this was happening under my nose. And we get the reveal, Travis Hymas, Poneglyph research. What to do with that?
Of course he was. Of course he was.
Yeah.
These
yeah.
these are stones that can't be destroyed, can't be damaged, and somehow, some way, an island of people that he can't get to carved on them. There is no way that is not some of the most tantalizing mystery stuff for someone of his caliber to want to get into. We know he was looking at the true history. We know he knows things now. It makes perfect sense. I do also want to say, with this reveal, whoever the traitor is, I think at this point we can go ahead and say that they are allied with the world government. I think that's pretty obvious that they are not only a traitor, they are very specifically allied. And I want to clarify, the world government, not the Marines. I think this goes higher than the Marines because
why would they want to kill CP0?
Evident. I mean, at this point, it's probably just to clean up the mess. If they are working with the world government, it would not be hard for them to check in with Saturn, for example, on a Denmushi and say, hey, things have gone to crap, and have Saturn just go, okay, well, if they've let that happen, then we don't need a Rob Lucci and a Kaku anymore. You know what I mean? Like, that's an easy, okay, sure, no problem. Clean that mess up, especially since we know Rob Lucci was asking questions at the beginning of this arc. He was being like, I wonder if this has something to do with a thing we're not supposed to talk about.
But then But why then CP5 and CP7 and CP8? Like, what?
It's one of those things where we know. Well, I mean, CP0 has more clearance than a CP5, for example. So, how much information is each cipher pool level allowed to have? How much, since we're talking about poneglyphs and true history and all that stuff that usually justifies a buster call, I think it's one of those things where he got real close to something or knows specifically something that he should, like, beyond even what Nico Robin knows or has had the potential to learn to this point. I think, maybe it has to do with Eam directly, maybe not. Whatever it is, I think this little detail has prompted everything else. Why does Shaka feel like his death is coming soon? Because they learned something that goes beyond the thing you are not supposed to learn to, it doesn't matter how valuable you are, you have to be removed. We're talking top of the level thing, and again, we're talking about just the very hint that Eam existing was worth eliminating an entire island from the map when they have not done that for other things. I've talked about this with other people. I don't think I've talked about this on here, but it's obviously the narrative, the meta narrative reason that we have never seen this weapon used before is because it didn't exist, right? But in the context of what we know about the world government, what we know about One Piece, it is very strange that, for example, Ohara was a buster call and not a complete elimination, because the choice to make it a buster call is what allowed that information to survive, which we now know for sure. Whereas, based on what we know right now, that the island that shall not be named because it doesn't exist anymore is in fact gone. God Valley is a myth practically to most people who weren't there. Basically, it's not even a story that Marines are told all the time until Sengoku's like, yeah, sure, whatever, I'll tell you. But, we use buster calls. We use CPs. We use CP agents. We do all this stuff. There's a tier of seriousness. So if Ohara is worthy of war crimes on its own just for the pursuit of knowledge, and we know Eam is worth complete and total annihilation, there's a whole bunch of stuff that could be between there that Vegapunk could have learned, up into including, hey, this actually requires full-on annihilation. Obviously we're not getting 10 buster calls worth of ships, but 100 ships is more than we have ever seen in canonical One Piece. So, we're talking actions that have never been taken before. But I think right here, that bolded text, Poneglyph research, that's the kernel that pieces all this together and tells us, hey, there's still something this guy hasn't said to the crew. There's still one more mystery out there. And I am almost certain at this point he's not making it off the island. I'm just going to say it. That, like, if he's got something that valuable, he is not making it on the Thousand Sunny. There's almost no way.
It's not that I disagree. It's just, and like, obviously, like, my mind immediately goes to, if it's world government, why not just use the weapon to blow up the island if it's that bad? And I know your argument would be like, oh, because it's in between. It's not the same level as the existence of EAM being known. But it does kind of make you wonder. It's like, you know, I guess like the Vegapunk research and all that stuff is still kind of valuable to them in some way. Like, I could even buy something along the lines of, like, if it is like a traitorous satellite allied with the world government for whatever reason, you know, would they essentially be doing this because that, I don't know, like, they could be the real Vegapunk, you know, and then they get to, like, you know, maybe that's why the world government's okay with eliminating the real one, because they have this, like, backup that they installed. But then at that point, why capture the CP agents? Why not kill them? Why capture them? See, I just don't get it. And why capture Vegapunk? Like, the world government's goal is to assassinate him. If they have somebody, they would have done it. They would have just assassinated him right there. And why capture him alive? It doesn't make sense. Travis,
you are right. Now, this is a thought that I have just had as we're having this conversation. It is fresh in my mind. I cannot back it up with, like, research or anything. But if he was studying poneglyphs and hypothetically he figured out how to read them, or got information on how to read them, since he had access to the Library of Ohara, that's theoretically possible that he has gained the ability to translate the poneglyphs. What if, since we know that his brain is hooked up to a big neural network, something he found and read on a poneglyph changed one of the satellites? What if it reprogrammed
we talked about this,
one of
we?
them? I don't know in the context of this way, but, like, one of them becoming corrupted or something, right?
Yeah.
The full Terminator. Some almost like malicious code. We know this technology exists, like, not necessarily the satellite technology, but, like, technology, advanced technology that Vegapunk himself doesn't fully understand, existed at the time that these stones were created. What if there's malicious code in there? I just made that up out of nowhere. I cannot back that up whatsoever. It just
like a virus or something like that. I mean,
inadvertently.
I
like
mean,
a morality virus.
That would speak to the malfunction language, the design flaw language. I know you ascribed it to the Seraphim, but I honestly, that to me feels like, you know, and I'm still open to the idea that this is a rogue Seraphim. You know, that this is, you know, S Flamingo or whatever the hell. Why does it have to be a warlord of the sea? Maybe it could be somebody else, you know, S whoever, S Jaguar Saul, who knows?
That is an animal. That's an animal. It's fair.
Well, I certainly like the idea that Vegapunk's poneglyph research would be all encompassing, but I hope we find out soon, like, what, you know, is the main thing that he's learned about, you know. And to me, I've always liked the idea that the poneglyphs are made at the same thing as the red line, and, you know, Vegapunk looking into the origins of, like, what the red line is and the poneglyphs, and, you know, I've always liked the idea of, like, even the existence of Laughtail and where it could be and, like, what hides it, and why the road poneglyphs lead to Laughtail is the kind of thing where we need somebody to sort of explain some of this stuff to the Straw Hats, and we have Vegapunk for that sort of thing. We have Vegapunk to sort of aid in the, you know, give Robin some of those clues, not just getting another road poneglyph as a MacGuffin, but actually getting somebody who, you know, can help them in a case where the road poneglyphs are currently under siege by multiple interested parties. And that leads us, I think, in Albaf, because that leads me to a bunch of stuff I want to talk about with Albaf, actually. And
I think the only other thing that I want to call out before we move on is he's talking out loud at this point. And if the other agents can hear him, he no longer cares that he's saying out loud that, oh, we were doing poneglyph research here. So something has drastically changed.
Yes.
Or he's talking to himself. It's possible.
The first thing I want to mention with the Shank stuff in this, he's drinking out of a comically large sake cup, which is the first, of course. Not the first, actually. The first giveaway this is Elbath is it says we're in a bar, a little port along the coast. First calling it a little port, and then showing us like it looks like a Viking longhouse. You're like, okay, yeah, so it's Elbath. I feel like it's kind of weird that they build up tension to it. It's like it's this big reveal that we're in Elbath. Like we know, like it's pretty obvious. But either way, I love seeing Shanks drink out of that sake cup. And I messaged you, Travis, while I was in Japan, while I was drinking out of a sake cup just like that. And you're like, what is it, John? I'm busy. I don't have time to talk to you about One Piece. And I'm like, when do you? And then you're like, fine, fair enough. And then I messaged you this and I said, Luffy's straw hat looks just like a sake cup, just like upside down. And then you're like, what are you talking about? That sounds ridiculous. And then I was like, oh, let me rephrase it because I'm terrible at writing. And then I did. And then you're like, oh, that's what you meant. And then you were just like, essentially, not to paraphrase, you're like, that's pretty sick.
I'll tell you exactly what I said because I want you to know what went through my mind.
Yes,
okay?
yes, okay.
So when you sent me that message, I thought you had stumbled upon some sort of grand revelation. Some sort of big, deep symbology. And so I was like, wait, what? And then you're like, no, I'm drinking it's upside down. I'm like, that's the most incredible thing I've ever heard. But Artur didn't even zero in on that.
But no, right? Like I was wondering actually if you'd come across anything like if anybody had ever made that connection. The sake cups are such a big thing in One Piece, and people have been trying to puzzle out the significance of the straw hat for a long time. The idea, some people are like, well, it's a straw hat. It protects you from the sun. I was like, yeah, but Luffy's the sun. Why does he need? And the sake cups have always been so important. The idea of like, you become family when you exchange sake cups. A lot of people believe that the One Piece, if it isn't a sake cup, it's like related to it in some way. I don't know. But where I keep landing with this is the idea that like Luffy's straw hat is a symbol for a sake cup. That like him sharing his, sort of like his sake or like feasting with everyone, the hat sort of embodies that. And I think it does have significance beyond just like a nice little like Oda loves puns and like references and double meanings, but also just the idea we have seen a huge straw hat, Joy Boy straw hat, presumably. And I think that it's interesting that Oda places this in here. He places like this massive sake cup, kind of like a massive straw hat. And I don't think it's coincidental. So I'm sticking my flag here. And Travis, I know I don't have it fully baked. I didn't send you a dissertation on this. I don't have something where I'm just like, all right, Travis. It's not like my Kuma theory. I'll say that.
It hit me and I was like, oh my God. Oh my God. You might be on, like, you might got it. You might have it right there. Genuinely, I was like, that's the most incredible thing I've ever heard.
One little puzzle piece in a puzzle that's like a giant would use. Honestly.
Yeah, but I mean, isn't that One Piece in a nutshell?
Yeah, a little bit. Before we
jump, we jump too far ahead with him, a lot of people have made light of this sequence because it's Shanks getting smashed super hard in a small bar while regaling a child of his exploits, and that child wants to go with him, and everybody's like, oh, this just means Shanks has always done this to kids, and Luffy's not special. He just ate devil fruit.
How many kids is Shanks gonna adopt? Who knows?
Right. And so I understand the desire to want to be really cynical about this particular sequence, because I too have entertained the questions of, hey, what is Shanks' actual agenda? But I think the point here is, well, I think this is Oda signaling something to us. And what he's signaling is before, in the past, when Shanks shows up, it is but a moment. It is but a fleeting tease of what hundreds of chapters would eventually give us. He shows up and ends a war. He shows up and drives off an admiral. He shows up to read a newspaper, and sometimes he shows up to drink out of a comically large sake cup. This is hardly the first time we've seen him do any of these things. But Now, especially with the follow-up page giving us a full top-down body shot of red-haired Shanks, just like a character introduction in any other point in One Piece, I think we are at a point now where we're going to see a much larger amount of Shanks in a much shorter amount of time. I don't mean that like they're going to go to Elbaf and we're going to have Shanks versus Luffy and he's going to give the hat back and we're going to have all of it. I mean, we're going to cut back to this. We're going to keep seeing him. We're going to know what he's doing actively for the first time since he went and visited Whitebeard. Because now he has been introduced as a proper player to the story using Oda's design language, and there's literally no other way to just set him up but to take us right back to the beginning. And so I don't think this is undermining. I don't think this is cynical. I think this is genuinely Oda using his composition to say, hey, something has changed. And this man is like, we used to make Shanks chapters like the biggest deal in the entire world. And let me tell you, this is the biggest deal in the entire world. But we're at a point now where he can't just keep effing off for 100 chapters. Even the gap between this appearance and his appearance at the end of Wano is small, and a lot of people were cynical about that being a tie-in to One Piece Red. No, he needs to be here now. We've reached a point where even if Luffy isn't ready to meet him directly, he's here now. He is the fourth emperor. He is, in a lot of ways, one of the biggest threats in the entire series, and it's time to start taking that seriously. So here he is, and it is awesome.
We've kind of known that he has a fleet of some sort since Wano. You know, when we started to see like, oh, he has like younger people, he has multiple ships. And for the longest time, we thought this guy was just like, kind of like the Luffy crew. You know, kind of like the Blackbeard crew in a way, where it's just, it's just a couple buds. And, that's changed Luffy, obviously, where now he has his grand fleet that he doesn't take particular ownership of. So we've kind of, lost that. But, not that that's losing anything. I think that it speaks, of course, to his influence. And I think that that is a power scaling thing in One Piece. One Piece isn't just about, who beats who in a fight. It's about, in Shanks' case, one of the reasons he's been considered one of the toughest emperors is because a lot of people in his crew and the gap in power between them isn't that significant, especially compared to characters like Big Mom, Whitebeard, and Kaido, who are monsters. But, if you really start to break it down, it's really Kaido, King, and Queen. Jack and below are tough, but there's a big gap. And then also if you look at, Big Mom, Katakuri, maybe Smoothie, maybe it's a little bit less clear there because the sweet generals are, Luffy beat Cracker in 2 chapters or something like that, and at the same time they built Cracker up to be big because he took down the Rouge or whatever, Mad Monk. And so I think that there's something to be said about how with Shanks, his crew he's full. He's got a lot of heavy hitters. And so I just wanted to bring that up. I really want to see, more than anything else, the red hair pirates again, doing stuff. And we don't see all of them in this chapter, Travis. Do you know who we don't see? I did a shot-for-shot look at this.
Oh, you pulled out the magnifying glass and everything, huh?
I did because I at first glance I was like, we're missing some folks. Okay, we see Monster, he's prominent. Monster's got to be there. Bonk is in one panel, but he's not in the next. Obviously, we see Lucky Ruin, Yasop, and Beckman. Obviously, they're the Monster trio, not including Monster. We do see Hongo. He's kind of looking down or whatever. We see Building Snake. He's kind of next to Shanks right there. We don't see Lime Juice and we don't see Gab, unless I'm missing something here. But I did not see either. Right? And yes, we see Rockstar.
No, you're not.
But
I think they're.
What's that about?
I think they're. Obvious guess is they're out on one of the ships.
They're senior officers.
My guess, because right, but we just learned. Well, we just learned that not all the from this sequence, we just learned that not all the senior officers travel with Shanks exclusively because, and this is either me being an idiot or we just got confirmation of it for the first time, one or the other. But Kid's whole thing with Shanks, I had been operating under the understanding that Kid picked a fight with Shanks directly, and Shanks taught him a very quick lesson.
That's what we all thought. We thought Shanks took his arm.
That's what we thought.
But now we know.
He had nothing to do with it whatsoever, and it was probably Ben Beckman having a laugh, which is, boy howdy.
Well, how do you know it's Ben
Beckman?
Beckman?
A lot of questions.
Because you just said they don't travel. They don't. But you just said they don't always travel together, right?
Exactly. That's what I'm saying. Because Ben Beckman says, with emphasis, our enemy must be furious. And Lucky Roo is like, that's rich coming from you. Who do you think he's mad at?
Well, that's the thing. Because, okay, the context for this is, hey, Captain, you actually attacked us. Blah, blah, blah. There's going to be a fight or whatever. And then he's like, I spent too much talking about it. You can't blame us. You can't blame us for wanting to catch up when old friends who thought each other dead are reunited. That's a weird thing to say about Shanks, right? Because like the old friends who thought each other dead, he's talking about Dorian Broggie. Like they thought the Giants were dead. That's how the government tricked them into working for them back at Enni's lobby. But why would Shanks? I don't know. It doesn't connect for me. Because when Beckman says our enemy must be furious, I didn't take that he was talking about Kid. I was wondering if there's somebody else he's talking about. And I was also wondering if like the old friends might also be referring to Jaguar, D-Saw. And I know I'm probably overthinking it. You like to Occam's razor this stuff, but I don't know. When he says that's rich coming from you, Beck, he uses a rifle. How would he... A rifle?
He uses a rifle. He uses
Kid's arm
with hockey.
Oh, you're right. I forgot about hockey.
and we have never seen Beckman fire the gun. We have only ever seen Beckman use it like a club. There is no. I mean, nobody had to say it was a clean cut for one. You know, maybe he mutilated it and it had to be amputated. We don't know. But also, it's hockey. He probably shot his arm off, if anything. Whatever. Ben Beckman pointing the business end of the gun is enough to make an admiral stop dead in his tracks. So, I'm just saying, the idea that he can't just take somebody's limbs off is probably not likely. I doubt it was even a fight in that case.
Because Killer says they got beaten to a pulp, so it couldn't have just been a sniper shot. And, no. I mean, I guess...
But Beckman has no problems getting up close.
I guess, but who did it? You know, that's kind of, if it was was it really just Beckman taking down all of them, or was it also?
That would be sick. Could you imagine? I mean, we don't know what he can do. We don't know what any of these guys can really truly do. He can't be the sniper. That's Yasop, right?
Yeah.
So what is actually coming out of the business end of that gun? That's the question. I'm not going to say he's like shooting swords or anything, but like, again, it's enough to scare Kizaru. It's, the implication here, because I know you're reading super into it, but there's a big return here that I think the title chapter refers to, which gave me big Jinbei joining the crew face. But yeah, to me, that just screams like, hey, not only did he take Kid's arm off, it's basically a joke. It's this exchange is just a perfect, like, Zoro saying a thing and literally any other member of the crew going, yeah, whose fault is that? kind of energy is what I'm getting from that.
Yeah. I'm kind of curious. I'm trying to remember what everybody is like their roles. So Ben Beckman's first mate, but that's it. He's not a first mate. And Yasop is the sniper, like you said. Hongo is the doctor. Building Snake is the navigator. I'm trying to remember who else is who. I don't think we know what Gab's role is. I think Bonk is the musician. And do we know what Lucky Roo is? Is he the cook?
No.
Who's the cook?
I'm inclined to say he's the cook, but he's also possibly the fastest man alive.
Oh no! So he is the cook. He is the cook.
He is.
So there. Okay, but still don't know about Gab. Sorry for the tangent. Rockstar is and Monster is the pet. But Rockstar is kind of like their messenger. That's all he's really done. Is like send messages to people and relay things to the kid pirates. But the Straw Hats don't have a messenger, right? They don't have somebody like Rockstar. They have Bartolomeo.
That's what I was about to say. He's the Bartolomeo. Yeah. That's exactly what was going through my brain.
There you go.
Hey, how many limbs do you think Bartolomeo has now?
Oh gosh, that was something else. I saw somebody made this connection I thought was interesting, where they said how Shanks and Kid have a ton of like visual similarities. Both have red hair, both have a scar over their left eye, and both are missing an arm. And I never made that connection before, but I feel dumb for not. But yeah, do you think there's any importance there, or do you think there's? I know a lot of people have compared Shanks to Tyr, the Norse god, because there's some symmetry in that story where Tyr loses an arm to Fenrir in order to surrenders or sacrifices his arm to Fenrir in the same way that Shanks sacrifices his arm to save Luffy in the beginning of the story. So there's always been that connection between Shanks and like Norse mythology, which is very Elbaf. But what about Shanks and Kid? Why do you think Oda has made? Do you think it's coincidence that Oda has made them so like visually similar?
This is tricky because again, we've spent a long time under the assumption that these two had directly clashed and had beef, and we know the first time around Kid came to start stuff, and so weeks ago I would have said, yeah, there's something here, but then we got all that SBS stuff about Kid. And I'm less confident about Kid's future in the story. I don't mean that he's going to like die, but like I don't think we're getting the same kind of like multi-arc Kid evolution like we got Law. I think that ship has now sailed. Yeah.
And for those who don't know, the SBS kind of just shows us that Shanks and Killer were part of these islands in the South Blue that were like, it was like gangland. Like there were these gangs kind of fighting each other, and Kid and Killer used to be enemies, but they eventually like banded together and sort of united everybody, and eventually set sail as pirates. But you know, it's not like Law, where it doesn't look like that because it's SBS. It doesn't look like that's going to actually translate into the main story through a flashback or anything like that, unless it's filler content, which I'm fine with. I don't think Kid is particularly that interesting for those reasons. I think he's interesting for other reasons, like how he and Luffy are such interesting rivals, the way that they both are sort of similar but have obviously like major differences that set them apart. And in this case, he's doing a very Luffy thing, being like, all right, I lost against this person before, I lost big time, but I'm gonna go for it again. And I respect the heck out of Kid for that.
Yeah, and it has always felt like he is the Luffy who didn't get the anime protagonist powers, right? Where he's had a very similar goal, but he's had a much more rough upbringing. He's had to basically grit his teeth and drag himself to the same place that Luffy has kind of plot armored his way through. Because, I mean, let's be honest, Luffy should have died a few times by now. And depending on who you ask, has.
Yeah. Where's my notebook? I keep track of this stuff. Yeah.
But you know, so I've always liked Kid as a rival for that, more than Blackbeard even, because we, you know, as much as we kind of know Blackbeard is being set up as an endgame deal, you know, his and Luffy's interactions have been small, whereas his and Kid's interactions have been poignant and quite defined. And
Kid is like
it feels like,
yeah, Kid is like the Kaido, Law is like the Whitebeard, and Luffy is like Goldie Roger, excuse me.
Which, you know, when we think about who you know, where those guys were arranged, you know, in their past and stuff, it makes it a very interesting dynamic that we may not get to see play out here. And I don't know if I'm disappointed about that or if I'm just reading too hard into it. I don't think this is the end of Kid, of course, regardless, but I don't know if we're going to get a proper arc where him and Luffy face off like we were kind of hoping Elbaf might be. Again, I am completely open to being wrong about that, because we know Kid well enough now that if you wanted to make him the enemy of an arc, we could probably just do that without any setup. But yeah,
I feel like we got to see something, because we got to find out who took his Kid's arm. And they just can't off-screen this, can they? Law and Blackbeard, I understand, because we at least saw some of that fight. But
it's more tense not knowing the end of that one.
Yes. And it was, at least we got to see part of it. That's the thing. In this case, I want to see part of it, because at least with Law Blackbeard, we know other things can intervene. We know Garp is on the way. We know that, there's a chance that other factors are going to come into play for Law if he lost. In terms of Kid, I think the story is trying to make it clear that if he loses, he dies. And so there's no way he's beating Shanks, right? Right?
I doubt it. I also really don't want him to die.
He's not going to
regardless
join
of what
Shanks.
the plan is.
Yeah.
No,
Shanks
but
wouldn't let him join.
No, I think it's just one of those things where we just spent so long with him gritting his teeth, reuniting with Killer, getting some genuinely good moments between the two of them, having some excellent fights in Wano. Just to kill them either on screen or off screen feels, oh, man, I would say that kind of feels like wasted potential. So I'm hoping for some kind of plot twist. There is the chance that, say, Prince Loki, for example, steps in and just puts a stop to this.
That's true.
But
here's the thing, though. If something happens,
pulling at threads.
Here's the thing, though, because if that happens, first of all, I think that Shanks needs to get the road poneglyph scrubbings from Kid in order for things to progress. But then, accounting for that, I don't think Kid can still be on Elbaf when and if the Straw Hats get there, because we just did this. They can't run into Kid again this soon. I don't think. Like, running into Kid and Lon and all that stuff, that to me feels like the big, like, Marineford, like, characters uniting thing that I think we still need some stuff in between in order for it to hit, because doing it so soon, it would just feel like whiplash, I think. And that's not to say that we are going to Elbaf next. Who knows? But I think they got to find the next poneglyph somewhere. Shanks clearly has one. But it makes me wonder then, they're setting sail, so who's protecting that poneglyph? Is it Prince Loki? Because we don't really know if Elbaf is straight up Shanks's territory, because, I mean, it's supposed to be Prince Loki's. It's a kind of a Fishman Island thing where the two of them have some sort of, like, backstory. But if that's the case, then why was Prince Loki going to marry Lola, right? Why was Prince Loki going to marry off into an alliance with Big Mom if he has an alliance already with Shanks? Is the alliance with Shanks more recent? So those are the kinds of things where I'm kind of like, okay, I feel like we need a couple more, like, revelations here, or more, like, clarification from Oda on what the power dynamics are.
This sounds wild and probably not true, but we don't know that it's an alliance. We don't know that even Elbaf is united. It's entirely possible that there's a sect that's Shanks friendly and a sect that's not.
Right, because we see him set sail with a few giants, not just Dorian Brogy, but a few. But we don't know. And that's the thing. It could be one of those things where, like, Prince Loki is like, all right, you're just hanging out. Like, you can do that if you want, but it's not like he's not allied with anybody. And that to me makes more sense, because the giants are built up to be so powerful as an army that it would seem a little bit too, like, power scale breaky if the Shanks pirates are that strong. It's kind of weird, because then at that point, why not set sail for the One Piece sooner? It feels like you would have enough resources then to take down Big Mom and or Kaido. But who's to say? Now he's exploiting a situation where Luffy and these two worst generation pirates have essentially done the work for him. If there was a reason he would spare Kid, it would probably be for that, right? Because he does say,
it's possible too that Killer cuts a deal behind his back.
There you go. Because he says, do you want to fight me here and now, or leave your road poneglyph and flee? He's not threatening to kill Kid at this point, but certainly, like, I could see him being like, all right, well, if it wasn't for you guys, I wouldn't be able to do this right now, because Shanks, for whatever reason, he just wasn't able to build up some sort of, like, offensive. The right things didn't happen for him to do. And I mean, we know he was close to Wano at that point. Maybe he was about to make his move, and they did it for him. So maybe out of, like, some sort of respect and honor, he spares Kid for that reason, and then something happens. Who knows? That would kind of fit, right?
Yeah, and this is probably as good a time as any to bring it up, but I guess this pretty much locks in for sure that no one told Shanks where the One Piece is, right? This pretty much cements that.
I don't think Shanks would ever have wanted to know. Yeah.
No, it's spoilers, right? Like he literally told them, we'll find it on our own when he's stuck around. But a lot of people have noted, like, he was on the ship while they were like reading the other poneglyphs and everything. Like, did he just not engage with that conversation? Probably not, because he was a dumb kid. Yeah, he's a dumb kid. And yeah, spoilers, right? Like, you just don't want to. But again, that's of course assuming that you could even understand the information just at a base reading anyway, which has never been, defined. Maybe he just didn't have all the information.
Here's my next comment. That's hopefully going to make your arm throb. That's a reference to Kid, not a masturbation joke, but okay. So the way this has all been set up with all these pirates fighting each other, Law versus Blackbeard, Shanks versus Kid. Well, it feels like a tournament, doesn't it?
I literally said this weeks ago.
And
it's a tournament arc. It's
a tournament. Yeah, you did say it was a tournament arc. And so who's Luffy going to fight? Buggy? Are we getting some cross-guild action next? Because if there was going to be an in-between, then cross-guild would make sense. We've been getting a little bit of like reference to like, obviously Mihawk and with Mr. One, we have Crocodile and all of that. Do you think we could have a kind of weird sort of Buggy versus Luffy and Zoro faces off against Mihawk a little sooner than I think a lot of us expected? What do you think?
I think if Cross Guild gets involved in anything, it's going to be at whatever's going on at Hachinosu, because their targets are not other pirates right now. Their targets are Marines. So, you got a big old gaggle of Marines going to Egghead.
That's what I was about to say.
You also have,
it's like that's what would draw them to
You have a big gaggle of Marines going, but you don't necessarily have Garp the hero. You don't have an easy pick-off.
That's true.
Not that he's weak, but like he's perceived as old, right?
But we do have a setup for who Blackbeard fights next. And it wouldn't be Shanks yet. It would be Garp.
It'd be Garp.
And so, yeah. So then Shanks beats Kid, and maybe eventually you get Shanks versus Blackbeard. But who else is a big heavy hitter? And I know a lot of people would say, well, there's literally an admiral heading to Egghead. But I don't know.
Yeah,
do you feel like we're heading to that?
It's one of those things where again, how long is this arc actually supposed to be? Because the grander like tournament arc thing feels more like that's kind of the grand meta narrative of the saga. Like the One Piece saga is Oda finally putting his foot down and making a tournament arc. Sounds like a great way to end this series to begin with. But when you cut down to just like the reality of the situation, there's a lot of major players running around that we haven't seen move. There's players that have never moved that are moving now. There are unknown pieces. We know that Dragon and his revolutionaries up until literally Kuma got up and started running away, were about to make a big move. So whatever, once the Kuma thing is resolved, however long that's going to take at this point, because we've kind of shelved that for a couple of chapters now. But whenever that gets resolved, Dragon is about to move. Where is he going to move? Is he going straight for Marijois? Is he going to go for strategic military bases? Is he going to go for these empty naval bases that are empty now because his son is causing a whole bunch of chaos? That's all of that is in flux out of nowhere. And, heck, even the public, right? So this is something we talked about before, and I'm going to revive a little bit as a part of this. We know that Morgan's received a tip telling him what was going on. And I had thought maybe that this was someone internally in the Marines. Well, now that we know that the traitor, so to speak, has been operating for a while and also has become very much aware of Vegapunk's deepest secrets, I'm wondering if they are also the leaker in an attempt to basically turn public narrative against Luffy for some reason. Maybe just for interfering, maybe for some other, because we don't know who it is. It's kind of hard to establish proper motivation. But up until this point, Luffy hasn't necessarily had bad public opinion against him. There's a lot of people who hear, the things that they've done, but there's a lot of stuff that they just don't have credit for. And Dr. Vegapunk is beloved. It's very easy to use Luffy as the fall guy for Vegapunk's death, which again, am very convinced is happening now, and have them in a situation where they just can't stop at a random island again, because not only are they going to attract Marines, which may or may not be a problem for them at this point. Luffy doesn't want to deal. He doesn't want to punch civilians. He doesn't want to have. He wants to have a good time and relax and explore. And civilians just not wanting anything to do with him is going to be in the way of that, or wanting him off the island and everything. Like, that's a potential threat, not necessarily a punch fight conflict, but it is something that's going to change potentially how this ends. The whole dynamic for everywhere the Straw Hats go from here on out is, up until this point, they've been blamed for a lot of things, but I think the death of a very beloved public figure. Think about Sabo being framed for King Cobra's death. How do you think Dragon would react to the reports of Luffy killing Vegapunk? He doesn't know Luffy like he knows Sabo. I mean, that's an interesting idea. There are other movers and shakers. Smoker is still technically a player in things.
He's due for another loss.
He's got to take another L somewhere. If Kobe gets away from Hachinosu, he's potentially a mover and shaker. Sword as an organization has technically not stepped out of the shadows yet, and for that matter, regardless of what happens here on Egghead, CP0 is still an organization. They still exist. There's even the implication that our friend who took a big club to the face for unlocking that there Gear 5th for Luffy, might have survived, which is mind-boggling to me, but is out there, because he apparently took the wanted photo for Luffy. Don't know. It
sounds like you're saying
possible.
Two things to me. It sounds like you're saying, well, Lucci is the first person that Luffy beat in this tournament, which I think makes sense. But then also, maybe Luffy's going to go up against Whitebeard's clone son next. And we're just going to... all jokes aside, I agree with you that like the next island is not going to be like Thriller Bark. Like, we're not going to like, Skypiea, where it's just going to be sort of like, all right, let's have an adventure. It's going to tie to the bigger story in like some, specific ways, but not, from here on out, like Egghead was about Vegapunk. We're going to be, like, if we go to Elbaf, it's going to be about, the giants of Usopp and, the man with the burn scars. Like, it's going to tie into content, I think, that we already have. I don't think Oda is going to keep on, like, stretching and stretching and stretching at this point. Because what would the end goal of that be? We're past the Four Emperors saga at this point. We're now in the final saga, the final stretch. And I think for that to work, we just need to see how all the pieces that are already out there get worked out. And we're still getting the exploration. We still got a lot of fun, like Luffy on Egghead being like, oh my gosh, holograms. Like, it's not going away. It doesn't mean that, like, everything has got to be super serious. But I do think that, like, for example, my best bet for like the next kind of location is probably going to be something related to the Marines, like a Marine base or something, where the Straw Hats have to go there to save somebody who gets captured. Who knows? But I do think that it would make more sense to break up the story in that way than to kind of just do a repeat of like Punk Hazard, or even just Wano. Like, we don't need another raid. We don't need another like whole cake island. Like, get away, like run away from the big scary threat. They kind of need to do something a little bit more dramatic. And yeah, I like the tournament arc idea. Consider me fully subscribed to the tournament arc idea. I rang the bell for notifications, Travis, and I'm excited about it. Anything else? Because I did want to squeeze in something real quick before we say goodbye.
We have not addressed the Dory and Brogy in the room. Yeah, Dory and Brogy are here.
I'm happy to see them. I missed them.
I'm so hyped. Who do you think won?
My thinking was that they didn't win. Friendship won, right? No, it's not satisfying.
100 years and friendship won.
The Straw Hats changed them.
They were, except they were still fighting after 2 years. We know that for a fact. Something happened between Fishman Island and right now. So who won? One of them had to win. Or Shanks went and got them and put a stop to it. That's the only other thing I could think of.
Yeah, and I know they're not pictured here. We don't see the giants from any's lobby, but these are the giant.
they're here.
Where
They're here.
They're here. I wanted to double check because I said that earlier, and I was like, I wanted to make sure that everybody's accounted for because there is another giant we haven't mentioned who I wonder where his role in the place, and he's part of the Straw Hat Grand Fleet. Do you think Haruden and them are going to be coming into the story at any point?
They have to, right? We have yet to see their grand action that would change the fate of the world. They have to show up eventually. Again, like I said, there's so many movers and shakers that have yet to register their entry in the tournament arc that have to. And again, creating a situation where it's Luffy versus the world is gonna rally them because that's what they said. When you're in trouble, call for us and we'll come get you, kind of deal, right? So. Something's got to happen. It's going to bring them back into the story. It will be interesting to see because they have made a lot of relationships with a lot of giants, and if these giants do have factions, if Dory and Brogy are like if they're really old friends of Shanks, right? If they've known him forever, how does that reconcile if him and Luffy are rivals, right? Because they are going to be rivals. I think Shanks is going to do Luffy the respect that he deserves, and this is not going to be keep the hat, don't worry about it. Here's my poneglyphs. Good, congratulations, you're the sun god. I don't think this. I think Shanks has actual respect for the situation, and Luffy's going to have to, compete with him, not necessarily fight him, but compete with him, Luffy might have some giants, but Shanks also very clearly has some giants. So
yeah, and also
Luffy's action seems in our future.
Luffy's giants seem more rebellious. They seem like more pirates. Like they seem like people who are just like they don't want to be at Albath. Like they actually want to break free of Albath's traditions, right? Whereas like Dory Brogy, they're old school. They're more traditional. So I think that's worth pointing out. I didn't mention this before, but another sort of out that Kid has is he defeated Big Mom. And defeating Big Mom, somebody who is despised by Albath, by the giants and Prince Loki. So that's another cap in your feather in your cap. There it is. In terms of if somebody was going to intervene, it probably would be the giants. Be like, we kind of owe that if they know that Kid defeated Big Mom, which is all over the news, then they can kind of point out, it's like, he did us a solid. Like he took care of somebody who was genuinely like one of the most hated human beings. We can call her a human being. Because for reference, like the giants, as far as they know, Big Mom like ate alive somebody who was evil, but they didn't know was evil, right? And also like is responsible for a lot of deaths on Elbath. It's a lot of it not super like 100% Big Mom's fault because she was a kid and her cravings she loses control, but that's a whole other tangent for conversation. But yeah, just wanted to point that out, that there's another little pathway there.
Yeah, I think we had such different ideas even going into this arc of what was going to happen. We were like, oh, look at the futuristic stuff. Look at the light punching gloves. And we're like trying to piece these all together. And then we've completely taken another direction. And now we're talking about who's the imposter and tournament arcs. And there's so, again, I'm coming away from these chapters and I'm feeling heated. I'm feeling flushed. And I'm like, we're on fire. Every single time Oda puts pen to paper and ink to page, it's just these spitting flames left and right. And I'm glad they give him breaks, but boy, howdy, do these break times make it really hard on me because I want to see what is next.
All right, it's crystallizing me. I was rereading. It's crystallizing me a little bit more what you meant about Shanks and the catching up because he's clearly talking about he spent a bit too much time talking, and that's why they're getting attacked by Kid because they should have already left, but he was catching up with the giants. I didn't fully get. I think that's like my first thought, but then I was jumping to something else, and it confused me. But then Beckman sort of changes the subject there. I was connecting those two things, so I think I see what you're saying. Whereas like our enemy, he is talking about Kid, huh? And then it is being played out as like Lucky Roo being like, yeah, who do you think he's mad at? Okay. So okay. A W
we
for
all
Travis.
know. We all know, and I am just as bad at this as everyone else. The greatest villain in all of One Piece is reading comprehension, so it's fine.
I also was kind of curious about like when we see the ship sailing, it looks like there's a dividing line in the sky. Do you notice this?
Oh yeah, we've seen this multiple times
Yeah.
as we've gotten glimpses of Elbath. There's like a wall or a tree or something there.
There's a
Part of
wall
why
or
I
a
wanna
tree.
go so bad.
A lot of people, bring up the Atom tree and stuff, and Usopp has brought that up. He's made the connection, like the wood that the Sunny is made from, and all of that. And one of the things I was wondering when I saw this again is like, could that have something to do? Like, if it's a dividing line in the sky, I've always liked the idea that like Laugh Tale is hidden, and it has something to do with like the composition of the world, like something about the poneglyphs like opens up something in the world that lets you get to the island, because otherwise. Why? Any of this?
Hard agree. Agree. Yeah, that's a good line of thinking.
So just something to point out. It's something that's been speculated a bunch already. I wouldn't dare say that it's an original thought. I'm sure many people have wondered the exact same thing. But yeah, that's all I had.
Yeah, we have burned through a lot of content, and it will not be long before we have to do it again.
Yeah.
I think we did good.
I think I just got to drop this bomb. And it's not something we have to talk about at length or anything, but I just want to bring it up because the SBS, I know you probably want to take off your headphones and call it a night, but Travis, how can we not?
There's so much that happens in this that I feel like we could go another hour.
We could, but let's just start with the plain facts. We don't have to talk about the implications, but it has been resolved to an extent. Zoro is in fact related to Urashima, the late daimyo of Ringo of Wano. And not it wasn't his dad. This is great uncle. Is that how it worked out again?
Yeah,
uncle
so
or great uncle, I think.
Either great uncle or grand uncle, one of the two. I always get them mixed up. So, but yeah, not direct line on the family tree side.
But that's why they look so related. And as a lot of people speculated, because Oda said a while back, like, no, he's not Zoro's dad. But this does mean that Zoro is from the same line as Ryuma. But in the SBS, basically Oda put out the family tree. And the idea is that a bunch of people from Wano, including the sword maker, including the people who that Kuina eventually would descend from, including her father, who trained Zoro as a kid. They're all from Wano, and they kind of like left Wano against the law illegally in order to find another place because, probably because they felt a bit restrained. And they ended up wandering to the East Blue and then fought a bunch of mountain bandits and kind of set up shop there. And so that's kind of why Zoro's parents, or, we find out a little bit about that stuff. It's all interesting. You can check it out. Like, we don't have to go at length here, but it does sort of solidify that like Zoro's parentage, it's not like Sanji. It's not something that I think is going to get a whole arc. It's not that important. It feels like something that, and Teki made this point, and I think he was right. It feels like something Oda probably wanted to include in Wano, maybe to put in a couple chapters, but eventually was like, you know what? It doesn't push the story along. It's not that relevant, and we just don't need it. So we can just sort of not even go there and just let I can just do it via SBS, which I'm fine with. I just wanted to know. It wasn't one of those things where I'm like, I know some people were disappointed, but I'm like, it's fine. Who cares? Like, let's get to the One Piece stuff. Like, that's what we're here for. Yeah.
It's I think when it comes to the audience, they like playing the same game that Sanji and Zoro like to play themselves, which is a little bit of a competition. So Sanji got this whole big flashback arc. He got this whole big leaving the crew saga and all that jazz. And so people were really hoping that Zoro would get the same thing, whether that's, trying to, Charlie Day his whole family tree out, trying to like poetically tie him into the story of Wano, or even the more crazy stuff like Zoro kills Kaido. Like, they really wanted Zoro to get the big triumphant moment like Sanji did. And the thing about it is that while that's true, and these two are often set at odds with each other, the reality of the situation is that there are two very different characters with different motivations and different personalities. Zoro's like I said, Zoro often finds himself kind of shifting into the background for a lot of people because he, has that particular personality that doesn't always get extreme. He tends to be a bit more level-headed, at least in his front-facing presentation, compared to the other Straw Hats. He's not so animated all the time. He's often in the background just making faces, taking in the information. But that's what sets him apart from a lot of the other crew, for one. And also, we have always known where Zoro is going, and we have always known that there's going to be a thing that's specific to him.
Not even Zoro knows where he's going, to be clear.
And not even Zoro knows where he's going. But we know that eventually, and he's had, he's got one of the most interesting little things going with his particular dream. And that's that not only does he know who he has to overcome to achieve his dream, he's basically been set up that way by the person he has to overcome. And he's had to swallow his pride for that. Sanji never had to get on his hands and knees and beg Zeph to teach him anything. That's a Zoro thing. Zoro having to learn a little bit of humbleness. The nothing happened moment is one of the hypest moments in One Piece, because as much as Sanji wanted to be the man who did that, only Zoro could have done it. Only Zoro has that kind of steel resolve to do the kind of thing that he needed to do. And that's the thing. They're two different guys. Trying to scale them to the point where they're like these equivocal mirrors of each other is just a lesser way of thinking about both characters. I think the way that this was handled, it's in an SBS, and like I just said, things that make it into the SBS don't always make it back into the story, and that's kind of a bummer. Storytelling is always about fiddling little knobs. But the idea that Zoro had to come and be like this weird, like, returning immigrant thing, it would have required a lot of restructuring of the arc. I think there's no way that it wouldn't have felt a little bit weird. And I'm much rather a fan of Luffy inspiring, being kind of that undercurrent flame that supported the already existing flame of revolution. Because a lot of these stories end up being like savior type stories where you come in and you inspire like a burnt out population to rise up again, and you're an external person. And again, I think the Straw Hats really served as a great support, even though they're ultimately the ones that took Kaido and his pirates down. The siege of Onigashima, the retaking of Wano belongs to the people of Wano. And I'm sorry, Zoro, regardless of his history, he didn't live there. He didn't have their struggles. And while that makes him incredibly sympathetic to their struggles, I think it's better that he stands with his crew as an outsider assisting rather than, having this special tie. And again, I know that means that he's different than Sanji and he didn't get the same kind of attention. But I promise you, it will come. He will fight Mihawk. It will come. You will feel great about it. Zoro got some of the hype stuff in Wano anyway. Take away even the heritage stuff. That mastering Enma is such a cool thing. Inheriting Odin's legacy that way is such a
Sanji
cool
got some
thing
cool
to
stuff
happen.
too in Wano, which people don't point out enough. The anime's in it right now, and it's like, it's good stuff. Like
Sanji, using Sanji's arc in Wano to resolve his lingering conflictions from Whole Cake Island. Yeah. Again, that's why One Piece is so great on a grand scale when you look at it from a top-down view, because we're paying off. People always say these characters don't have arcs, they don't have development. Yes, they do. It just takes a couple of arcs, guys. Calm down. And Zoros is just like him. It's kind of all over the place. But he will eventually find his way.
I did have fun because I read the SBS because I have the volume in Japanese. I had to use the Google camera, but it was cool seeing that. It's probably online too, but what are you going to do there? But also Tama, the long running theory that she is a Kurozumi was confirmed, and I'm glad because that was also like why don't you just reveal that, Oda? We know she's a Kurozumi.
So I made the reading comprehension joke a little bit ago, and the thing that forced everybody to have to confirm this is my pinpoint. You don't like reading comprehension is a thing that people need to have, because a lot of people. The reason that Tama being a Kurozumi was such a concerning thing for people was the end of the Wano arc with Hiyori saying Kurozumi was born to burn.
Yeah, We don't have to
There was
go
a
at
lot of
length
people
about that,
who-
do we?
We don't
Like-
have to go at length. No, we don't have to go at length. But I think it is important to note that no, this doesn't mean that they're going to find out that she is and they're going to light Tama
No.
on fire or something.
It's a reference.
That's not-
Odin said he was
it's
born to boil
parallels.
because he's Odin, and
They're
then
talking.
yes.
They're talking about Orochi. It's a story
Yes.
setup. It's one of those things where our pathetic, mixed up, dumb English language just cannot handle the nuances of. So confirming all of this is great. If you have a magnifying glass and you like zoom in on her parents' gravestones, you would have already confirmed it. To me, all this really confirms is just how much of a real piece of work Orochi actually was, because he didn't even elevate his own family members. They were just as much scum to him as anybody else, and he got what he freaking deserved.
Okay, I think that is our cue then to get what we deserve, which is a break from One Piece, at least for a little bit. So we'll be back, of course, to talk about chapter 1077. I surely cannot wait. But don't forget, if you want to drop a line with us, our email and Discord server link is in the show notes. We'd love to hear from you, especially if we got something wrong. I feel like I already know what I got wrong. Plenty. We figured it out in real time. But Travis, thanks as always. Talking to you about One Piece, that's the real treasure, isn't it?
It is, at least for us. Hopefully not the end of the series, though.
Yeah, that would be kind of bad, kind of pathetic, where he's just like, oh, it is like, it was Rookie Pirate Radio all along. All right, see you, everybody.
How did he know?